Hello everyone, hope everybody is doing well. Well, I wanted to offer my take regarding Andrew Yang, the guy who's well known to promote basic income, and as a result, he's running for president in 2020. And before I move on, I just wanted to point out that I think that even though his idea sounds reasonable, I think he'll have a better chance of winning in 2024. Because believe it or not, at least he's a guy that talks about more sane ideas and doesn't jump in the social justice warrior BS bandwagon along with siding with the corporate establishment Democrats. Because a lot of people are getting tired of it. People, especially the left, and even the right, of course, care more about the issues that truly matter in terms of able to put food on the table. And I also believe that Tulsi Gabbard, which I saw about a couple of weeks ago here in Las Vegas, has a better shot of winning in 2024 than she does in 2020. And I personally think right now for the Democratic Party, it's just going to be very likely to be a loser streak for them. I mean, you got Joe Biden with all the scandals. Kamala Harris is a joke. Look at the state of California. Bernie is basically done. So who do they have left? Beto? Did you see that video I made of him? I confronted him about a week ago. Well, at least Yang is not like Beto in many ways. But then again, the whole idea about basic income, I have a mixed opinion about basic income. So it's really about who is being taxed and how it works. Because it makes sense that when a lot of jobs are going to disappear due to automation, that's a totally different video that I have to produce. But either way, I think that it does make sense if you're going to see that. So let's just see what this guy really has to talk about.
Thanks for having me, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why are you doing this?
Well, I spent the last 7 years helping create several thousand jobs in Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, New Orleans, and other regions of the country. And there I saw the aftermath of the devastation in manufacturing jobs. I believe that the reason why Donald Trump won in 2016 is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the swing states he needed to win. And now my friends in Silicon Valley know we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, and most disastrously, truck driving jobs. And so that's why I decided to run for president, to help us manage this transition that we're in the midst of.
All right,
Right, and he also makes a good point. In fact, construction is something that is going to be heavily affected. Now, not all the job losses are due to automation. As you know, a lot of the job losses happen due to outsourcing. In addition, you've got women entering the workforce. And I've talked about this many times throughout this channel, immigration. And many of the jobs that's done by construction is done by immigrants, many of whom are not lawfully to be here in the country. And a lot of you who saw my videos regarding housing developments, you guys commented that many of those jobs are done by aliens. So to say as if that it's all being done by automation, which I don't think he has pointed out, but I want the audience to make sure that that is not exactly what's going on. So just kind of double checking to make sure what's going on. However, then again, many of these service jobs are still going to need a human being. I cannot imagine that a store that's going to operate and there's not going to be any humans in that entire retail establishment. So this is one of the things you have to keep in mind. But for me, if I want to be a developer and do some construction, I can push a button and a 3D printer can build something very fast, more efficiently, and less costly. Which is to say that a lot of people argue, well, his basic income proposal of $1,000 is not enough. But when you factor in that the cost of living may drop, the cost of goods and services will fall due to labor costs falling down, for an example, a starter home can be sold for $50,000, then that $1,000 basic income can make more sense.
Wealth comes from selling your test prep company, Manhattan Gym, right? That's where a lot of it comes from. But you're not a billionaire, but you're up there.
That's very kind. Yes, definitely not a billionaire.
Multi-hundred millionaire?
But I've had some success, and certainly I've looked around and seen that this country needs people like me to step up.
Okay. You are advocating, and this is a popular theme among many who are competing for the Democratic nomination, this idea of universal income, but you extend it to pretty much everybody. If you're over 18, $1,000 a month, have at it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And if you look at the history of this idea, it's deeply American.
So, first of all, I would not give it to every individual. Although I might change my mind on this. I was thinking, like, why should billionaires get this? Because it would make sense to give this only if you're in the bottom 50% or bottom 30% of Americans. Because let's get reasonable, because the wealthy people are going to be paying the taxes, and why should they all of a sudden get a negative income tax? How does that really work exactly? That's just my question. But, then again, I guess from this proposal, if you're going to give it to everybody, negative income tax, basic income, you might as well just end the personal income tax and find other means to tax the population. Which is to say, by the way, he's going to propose a value-added tax, and there's many other things that you can do. You can also tax Wall Street mega transactions, tax remittances, money gets sent abroad, issue higher tariffs. There's many other things you can do to tax the population, and you can just get rid of income tax entirely. But I'm just not sure exactly what his proposal is calling for.
Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King was for it. Milton Friedman, the leading conservative economist, champion in the 70s.
Good points.
In one state,
But it was never implemented.
It passed the House of Representatives twice under Richard Nixon, and it was implemented 11 years later in one state where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year.
You're talking about Alaska.
Yes, the Alaska Petroleum Revenues. Yes, but that's a deeply Republican state. It was passed by a Republican governor who asked the Alaskan people.
And that's a pretty good point. Alaska does have a lot of money. Now, this whole basic income proposal, could it also explain why Alaska has very high cost of living? Because I don't know about you, but home prices in Alaska are not cheap. Now, it's also important to know that how is this going to work in a state like Nevada? Because when you think about it, the largest employer is casino and gambling. And the largest actual employer is MGM Resorts International. And the guy who's, of course, the CEO, the most controversial person in our state, the George Soros of our state, is Jim Murren. The same POS who basically gave massive donations to Sisolak and sold company stock before the Route 91 incident. But anyway, do you really think that we can tax his company a lot to pay for basic income for everybody? We might have to. Now, he may not like it, and the question is there enough money? Probably. But Jim Murren, as you know, and I should have done a video about this earlier, he's planning to automate many of the occupations, bartenders, cleaners, cashiers, and so forth. And of course, this is going to put a lot of jobs at risk. Not to mention, it's going to put a lot of unions, like the Culinary one, in jeopardy. So the question is, now all these workers, especially immigrant workers, are they going to get basic income? Who knows? But again, we're going to talk about that later on. The question is, can this work in the state of Nevada or in California? That's a pretty good question.
Who would you rather get the oil money, the government or you? And what I'm saying right now...
But they're the ones funding that. Who would fund this? How would you pay for this?
Yes. So the way we fund it, and if you look around, you can see the headlines. Amazon paid no taxes last year despite record profits. Netflix paid no taxes last year despite record profits. What we have to do is we have to put the American people in position to start harvesting the gains from artificial intelligence, self-driving cars and trucks, advanced technology. And with that...
And speaking of self-driving cars, I just want to point out that self-driving cars could put a lot of jobs at risk. Insurance brokers, lawyers, DMV individuals, people who give out tickets. It could either have those jobs shifted or just replaced. What about the people who pave asphalt? We're not necessarily going to need a lot of parking lots when cars are going to be shared. So this is a thing you have to keep in mind. But then again, it could create a lot of other indirect jobs. People who create custom cars to sleep for their guests. And that's going to need a lot of creativity and talent.
Money, what I call the tech check, we can then fund this dividend for all Americans.
All right, but I'm sorry I'm slow here. I don't understand. I know you've got the attention of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, people who like that idea, but how do you pay for it? I mean, that would be over $2 trillion a year.
So the price tag comes...
Well, we should certainly tax Wall Street mega transactions and many others that I've talked about before, but I don't know if this guy is really open to it.
Down very quickly because we're already spending hundreds of billions of dollars on 126 existing welfare programs, which would be largely consolidated. A lot of that would get replaced by this dividend because people would vastly prefer $1,000 in cash unconditional to the hodgepodge of benefits with administration and monitoring that they currently experience.
But there are guys like you, do you really need the $1,000 yourself?
Well, the great thing is we can make this universal. It's a right of citizenship, and that means it's not a stigma.
I don't know about that.
Transfer from rich to poor. But the great thing, Neil, is that a lot of this, we can build a trickle-up economy from people and families and communities up because most of this money would just go right back into the economy through Main Street businesses around the country.
Okay, so again, the question is, I think he is probably overhyped about it. I don't know. But then again, I also want to point out that I don't like how Cavato keeps interrupting this guy. And this is one of the tactics of Fox News. So you also have to keep in mind that Tucker Carlson does that a lot, quite a bit. One of the things you have to understand is if there isn't enough money, one of the concerns I have is that his administration could possibly print a lot of money, and that could create a lot of inflation. Now, another thing I also wanted to point out is that what effect is this going to have in wages? Because the remaining jobs that's going to exist, we probably might see the wages go up. Because if a lot of people are not going to work for income, they're just going to sit back, get their $1,000, well, it's going to pressure a lot of employers to raise wages. Because now, of course, employers will have to raise the wages to encourage people to get into the workforce. It's hard to say, but that is a more possible scenario. So the real question is, will this really end up alleviating poverty? Now, you can argue that if you give enough income above the poverty threshold, it will get us out. But if the inflation rate is too high, then it's really not going to mean anything. Because the only way that basic income can truly work is if the inflation rate is very low or the policy is pegged to the real rate of inflation. And that's one of the things you have to understand. And certainly I would not want to peg it to CPI. Because CPI has not been effective in raising Social Security benefits.
Right now, there's an attitude on the part of many in your party, the predominant the left wing of the party, which a lot of people say is the party right now, that questions wealth. And even guys like yourself who succeed on your own and do a great job. Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, who sort of seems to be the spokesman for that movement, has said that every billionaire is a policy mistake. What did you make of it?
Well, I think you got to look at the big picture. The big picture is we're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the country. And billionaires are something of a natural byproduct
Good point.
of that giant wave. And so right
But
now
do
we
you
have to
agree
try
with
and
what
build a
she's
system.
saying, a policy mistake? Those billionaires created a lot of jobs, a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, they created a lot of jobs, but many of them have imposed policies that have exploited the bottom 90% by outsourcing, union busting, massive immigration, putting regulations that destroy small businesses through lobbying, huge campaign contributions, deregulating sectors of the economy that actually harmed us through the deregulation of Glass-Steagall. Many of these billionaires have not really helped the economy. And I believe that decades ago, America should have implemented a maximum wage policy which would have put a wage ratio of the bottom employee versus the CEO, 1 to 50. Then you would have not had all these very high out-of-control salaries, while you have many of their workers who depend on government assistance to get by. And many of these examples include Amazon and Walmart. However, here's the thing though. If his plan is to consolidate many welfare programs and give them $1,000, is that enough to live by? Does that include medical benefits, housing benefits, food benefits? Certainly a large part of living expenses is medical care and housing. So rental units would have to be about $300 a month for that to really work. And I can tell you that here in Las Vegas, the lowest you will be able to get is $400. And if you want to live in those units, good luck surviving the next night. Because many of the times I see those neighborhoods, there are police cars driving inside. So rental costs and healthcare costs would have to be managed. Now the question is, does that $1,000 cover all of that? I don't know. But if the cost of living is not low, then this policy cannot work.
You know, I think that there are ways that we can more effectively have the American people benefit from some of the huge winnings that people have experienced during this economy.
But
and I think most people would
politics, whatever, these guys have created gazillion-dollar enterprises that employ hundreds of thousands, millions across the country.
Yeah, and I'm in the camp, as you suggest, that our system creates very wealthy people who have been fortunate, yeah, but they've done a lot of value creation in many cases.
What would you raise their taxes?
Well, so to me, the focus on income taxes is not the right way to go. And I'm going to use Jeff Bezos as an example. So Jeff started Amazon. He has over $100 billion in Amazon stock. Hasn't sold any.
Right.
And so there's no taxable.
See, this is the problem. The problem is that as reasonable as he may sound, many people from both parties who are elected officials are not going to go with this idea. It's probably going to take a couple of decades when you have a massive awakening or some kind of something hits the fan approach that they will have to do this. But, you know, then again, it's you got to get approval, I believe, from Congress to do that.
So a wealth tax.
No, so I think a wealth tax, too, is not the right way to go. What we have to do is we have to join every other advanced economy in the world and have a value-added tax, because a value-added tax is much harder for big multinational companies to wriggle out of and game their way out of.
Most of the European nations have such a tax, and they're not exactly on fire.
Well, but you do see that they're able to harness more of the big winners in terms of the corporate companies that are generating lots of profits. They are able to get that tax revenue much more effectively.
Fewer than 10% of Italian citizens pay taxes, even in a high value-added tax nation. This is, I only know as an Italian American. But I'm wondering, you worry that good intentions are going to meet.
Okay, so first of all, one of the things about Fox News that gets me is that it's true that there are some policies in Europe that don't work. But Europe does have some good policy that the United States could learn of. They have lower amounts of income inequality in many of their nations than the United States. You see, and that's the problem. Fox News doesn't really talk about that. And this is one of the few issues that I actually disagree with the right. And it's one of the few issues that I think the left gets it right. But nevertheless, many of their policies on the left actually makes income inequality worse, particularly massive immigration and the destruction of the nuclear family. So this is one of the things you can argue how the left has really been hijacked over time.
You're going to stick Americans with a good size bill.
Well, in this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a dividend for all American adults, the freedom dividend, where every American citizen is the owner and shareholder of the richest and most advanced economy in the history of the world. We can easily afford a $1,000 dividend that's just going to go right back into the economy anyway. It's going to create...
Now, before I forget, I just wanted to point out that if he imposes this tax, there is a possibility that many companies who are headquartered in the United States might leave. But that can only happen if there are some countries that don't implement this, which there's a possibility that many countries will implement this. As a matter of fact, I think third world countries will have to tax the corporations as well, because many of these underdeveloped societies are at a higher risk of losing their jobs.
2 million jobs around the country and grow the consumer economy by 8 to 10%.
But you're talking about, this chance to deal with, truckers and manufacturing workers who could be out of jobs soon.
Yeah.
Right now, we're at record low unemployment. Key groups are looking at the highest employment levels we have ever seen. So a lot of people step back and say, well, Andrew's just missing that big picture. If it's so horrific, it would show up in the numbers, and it's not.
Well, if you look at our labor force participation rate, despite a small bounce back, it's still around 63%, which is close to a multi-decade low and the same levels as El Salvador and the Dominican Republic.
It's higher than when Barack Obama was president, so a lot of Republicans.
Well, that's a good point. The labor force has improved in the last 2-3 years. However, the employment picture is not looking pretty good, ladies and gentlemen. Because what Andrew Yang really needs to talk about, which I don't think it was on the top of his head, is that the labor force participation rate for males, because remember, the male is supposed to be the prime provider of income. The labor force participation for males between 16 to 64 years old, who are U.S. citizens, has fallen drastically since around the 1950s and 60s. It's been declining decade after decade. So this is the harsh reality. Now, you can argue that, yeah, outsourcing, immigration, all these different things has had an impact, but certainly, perhaps Mr. Yang does have a point. When you automate a lot of the jobs, heavy labor jobs that men are capable of doing, well then, perhaps, this is going to create a more glim employment picture for men.
Republicans will counter that if you were to become the party's nominee and say, been there, done a lot better than that.
Well, you can take a look at the curve, and it goes, it peaks around 2000, and then it starts crashing shortly thereafter, despite a very small bounce back.
It's just a matter of time before all this happens.
Well, if you look at the statistics, almost 1 in 5 prime working age American men is out of the workforce right now, and this is year 10 of an expansion.
And that's a very good point. Now, here's the thing about basic income that I really have an issue with. Basic income, in a way, is a kind of a form of a welfare system. And the problem with the welfare system, mainly I believe, and I've talked about this many times, is that the welfare state, first of all, has encouraged a lot of single moms. In other words, a woman can basically be promiscuous in her low 20s, have a baby, not get married, and get government assistance programs. Or, as a matter of fact, the woman can get married, have the children, divorce the husband, basically get child support, alimony, and then at the same time get many government assistance programs as well. And of course, that if the father doesn't pay it, then the father may end up going to jail. So you see the double standard against gender. But anyway, this is what the welfare system is promoting. And one of the results of that, it has resulted in children not growing up very properly, women being depressed, and increasing taxes among American citizens. So this is one of the things you all have to keep in mind, that, not to mention, it's disproportionately affected a lot of blacks growing up. Now, most important of all, the problem with basic income is that if you provide such service, this could mean that this will result in a massive wave of immigration. Now, the main reason why I think we're having these caravans pouring into the United States is due to the fact that they believe that if these folks come in, it's very likely that they believe that they will get citizenship, including their anchor baby children, which are born possibly the next day. And this is the problem. The problem is, who exactly is going to get basic income? Because if he's going to provide a pathway to citizenship for the 11 to 25 million illegal aliens, including their anchor babies, well, I don't know how this is going to work. It's pretty likely that the system will go bust. Even if you think that we have the money for them, we will get a massive flood of immigrants flooding into the U.S., legal or not. And for this thing to really, really work, I believe that we need a moratorium on immigration. Just like what Andrew Yang said, that we're going to have a shortage of jobs due to automation, which will pressure many people in Congress to change the number of green cards we give every year, along with the chain migration and visa lottery. But I also believe that, believe it or not, that we're going to have to limit it because we cannot give $1,000 to everybody who wants to come into the United States from all over the world. As a matter of fact, it's probably better that we give that $1,000 or even less, because the value of everything is less in many other countries to people from all over the world, having to keep them there because, of course, $1,000 buys you a lot more stuff in Mexico, in Central America, in Africa, than it does in the United States. So this, to me, is going to really have a significant impact on immigration levels. And we certainly do have a problem when we have a disproportionate amount, a higher number than U.S. citizens, native-born Americans, particularly white males, who are getting welfare. And this is getting really, really out of control. I certainly do not want DACA folks to get basic income. And it's important to know that many of the jobs that immigrants do, especially here in Las Vegas, are disproportionately at risk of automation. So if you take a look at the casino jobs here in Clark County, dealers, cleaners, cooks, cab drivers, cashiers, front desk, they are heavily done by immigrants, and they're heavily likely to basically be displaced. So if you take a look at what's happening here in Las Vegas, you have a lot of them who are basically pumped up by the unions, the SEIU, Culinary Workers Union. So as they get automated, what's going to happen to a lot of these immigrants? Especially the fact that they can't send money abroad. Are they going to be entitled to basic income, given the fact that a lot of them are not American citizens? Are my taxes going to go higher to support these people? Well, frankly, I think when this comes to due, I think it's going to put a lot of unions in jeopardy. And not to mention, it's going to trigger potentially a greater civil war in America. So what's going to happen is that this may result in a lot of us rising up, standing up, and demanding many of these immigrants, possibly even American citizens, to actually leave the United States and get basic income back in their own home countries. And by the way, if this happens, this could result in a massive population decrease in many cities across America, including Las Vegas. But yet again, there's a lot of arguments that could suggest that the opposite could happen through a lot of different factors. So anyway, I can go on with this topic, but this is my take of basic income. It all depends on who's being taxed and how the money is being allocated. Thank you guys so much. Please stay tuned for more videos. Please subscribe. Please share this video. Take care.